with tasers.
That's right. And Montepanassar, you might know him as a cricketer. Well, he's standing in the next election for George Galloway's party. We're going to have him in the studio to find out why. Don't go anywhere.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Flintshire, the A541 is closed in both directions at Mould after a fire that broke out yesterday afternoon. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the inside lane's closed northbound where someone's broken down between junctions 24 and 25 from Kegworth to the A52, causing delays. On the M25 in Kent, the inside lane remains closed each way for emergency repairs near junction 5 for the M26. Queues start a couple of miles before junction 5, and there's also a lane closed on the M26 westbound just before the M25 there, causing roughly 5 miles of queues towards there. On the M271 in Hampshire, there's a lane closed northbound out of Southampton after an accident between junction 1 and the M27 causing queues. And in Dorset, Ashley Road in Boscombe is closed after an accident with queues there too. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Sacre bleu! French police use knives to sink asylum seekers' boats in Dunkirk before an army of migrants then go on to overpower tear gas cops and ride on another dinghy to the UK. So this is very dramatic. So the French authorities have been accused in the past of being too soft on migrants. They haven't done enough to stop the boats. On Tuesday, we had the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl. Really awful scenes where one group of migrants kind of boarded another group's boat and people were just killed in the crush. So they're now taking this very sort of action man, Bear Grylls kind of thing. They're wading into the surf with a great big knife and just slashing the dinghies, which does seem kind of obvious, doesn't it? It seems like a good move. Apparently, up to now, they haven't wanted to get involved. They haven't wanted to have violence with the migrants. But this is their new plan.
Except British taxpayers have been paying them hundreds of millions of pounds or euros to deal with this, and now finally they're able to deal with this, obviously on the back of an incredible tragedy. This tragedy can be utilised by both sides in terms of, like, however they want to use it. We need to open up more the borders or ensure that there's safety here, and then other people say, let's prevent this from happening by stopping them getting in the water in the first place. So everybody's going to use it, but taking your point, Nick, and maybe moving to the question, Cressida, do you think that people are, and when I say people, I don't mean just GB News audience or people on the right, or just across the spectrum, are coming to appreciate that this is a real issue that has to be grappled with in a mature fashion, which starts with conversation without accusations of you being racist?
Well, maybe, but I think most people have known that for a long time. I mean, the reason Rishi put it in his pledges was because people knew it was a big deal and then just continued not to address it.
9:30 on Wednesday, the 1st of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So is it time to arm all police officers with tasers? The man tasered and arrested after multiple stabbings in North East London yesterday remains in custody, but he's yet to be interviewed given his injuries.
And is this a Rwanda success or is it a bit of government spin? A failed asylum seeker has been relocated to Rwanda after taking part in a voluntary removal scheme. We'll have the latest.
And the former England cricketer Montepanassar is turning his hand to politics. Find out which party he'll be standing for when he joins us later this morning.
And the Scottish Parliament will hold a no-confidence vote on their government today. If it passes, all Scottish ministers are required to stand down. Sounds like chaos.
So it's interesting, isn't it, when ex-sports people turn to politics?
It's not always a great success. Think of Seb Coe, one-term MP. Think of Colin Moynihan, who was an Olympic rower. He won a silver. He rose to the dizzy heights of sports minister.
The thing is, they should bring qualities that would be great for politics, right? Determination, focus, commitment. Discipline, but it's very different to the sporting world,
and you can also think about arts people too. Remember Glenda Jackson?
Oh, yes, of
Double
course.
Oscar winner. She was transport minister.
So I'm looking forward to seeing Monty Panesar. He's going to be here in the studio with us to tell us why he's going into politics. We'll be talking about the party he's going to be standing for as well. GBNews.com/your say is the place to let us know your thoughts. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. The Met Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has said a female police officer came close to losing her hand after a 14-year-old boy was killed and 4 others injured in a sword attack in north-east London. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. Former Met Police detective Peter Blexley drew parallels with the Nottingham attack and urged police to look into the suspect's background. The fact a failed asylum seeker volunteered to go to Rwanda is positive development as it shows the country is safe, the business secretary has told GB News. Kemi Badenoch confirmed the failed asylum seeker was reportedly flown out to Kigali in Rwanda yesterday. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. This scheme is said to be separate to a forced deportation programme due to start in July. Labour has criticised the move, accusing the government of being desperate to get any flight to Rwanda before the local elections. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch said the scheme is working.
I think we should remember that we're spending £8 million a day on this issue. That is not something that is sustainable. We have to deal with it. People said the Rwanda scheme wouldn't work. They tried to say that it wasn't a safe country. If it wasn't a safe country, we wouldn't have people volunteering to go. This shows that the scheme is working. People go to Rwanda on holiday. I know someone who's gone there on a gap year. We need to actually make sure that this scheme works. And that's what the Prime Minister is focusing on, getting people on those flights and getting them over there.
And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, we're asking a question after the shocking events of yesterday in Hainault, which were breaking on while we were on air. Should all police officers be armed with tasers? So only 7,500 of the Met's 34,000 police officers are trained to carry these devices. And if you think yesterday, Beverly, the 2 police officers who confronted the man with the sword yesterday, who are in hospital with serious injuries, neither of them had tasers.
No, that's right. We were watching yesterday, of course, and this has been on the news for the last 24 hours. The attacker was wielding this enormous sword, a kind of samurai sword, tragically killed a 14-year-old schoolboy on his way to school in the daylight, in a rampage is the only word you can describe it, in north-east London. 5 people were also treated for injuries in hospital. The dramatic footage shows the moment that he was stopped by police. And Rishi Sunak has said such violence has no place on our streets. So how do we tackle this issue?
And how do we get these... And remember that the law to take blades like that off the streets doesn't come into effect until September. Why does it take so long?
I don't understand it. Well,
when it was announced last year.
Former Detective Chief Inspector of the Met Police, Peter Kirkham, joins us now. Good morning, Peter. Thank you for joining us. We've all managed to watch bits of this footage in the last 24 hours. And what's so striking is the bravery of the police officers, male and female police officers, circling this guy when he's wielding this sword. And as a viewer watching that footage, just thinking, they've got nothing. They've got no gun, they've got no taser. Should tasers just be commonplace now as part of the police uniform?
Yes, good morning. My thoughts are with the victim of the tragic incident yesterday and all those affected by it and the officers. They have my praise for their bravery and best wishes for a recovery. As for tasers, my personal view is that all officers who crew emergency response vehicles that are on the road primarily to respond to 999 calls. All of them, I think, should be equipped with tasers. Some are, quite a few in some areas, but by no means all. But as for other officers on other duties where interaction with the public in contentious situations is far less likely, no, not necessarily so. The cost and training issues would prohibit that, really. It would be little gain for much expenditure.
Peter, you've raised the cost. I understand that every police force in the country has cost issues, but people watching and listening to this are thinking it shouldn't be a matter of cost. It should be whether it equips the police much better to do their job, and also to not then expose themselves to serious injury and potentially death. Both these police officers have suffered very serious injuries yesterday doing their job. We know that the woman police officer in particular, there's talk she could even lose a hand. But if they'd had tasers, it's speculation of course, they would have been much better equipped to take that man on, and perhaps could even have stopped the rampage early on.
For sure. As soon as officer engages with someone involved in something like that, if they have a taser, they have a fighting chance of bringing it to an end there and then. If they haven't got a taser, then I'm afraid with a bladed implement that long, nothing else they have, batons and CS spray, nothing like that is going to be effective to any significant extent. But as for cost, everything has to be viewed in terms of cost. If we're spending money on something, we're not spending it on something else. We don't have unlimited resources. And so we do have to make those decisions all the time. And we need to look at the cost-benefit analysis. And like I say, for me, at the moment, patrol vehicles, 999 response vehicles, all of them should be crewed with officers with taser.
The Police Federation, you'll know this better than me, is saying every officer who wants a taser should be equipped with it. What do you say to that?
I don't accept the view that an officer who wants a taser should get one and one who doesn't shouldn't. It should be looked at by the management who look at the risk assessment for each particular role. And if an officer is in that role and the management decide then it merits carrying a taser, they should carry a taser. And if it's one that doesn't, they shouldn't.
We're watching some of the footage here, Peter, of the officers when they've surrounded this guy and they are arresting him, and they eventually do get him with the taser. Just talk us through how efficient or effective tasers can be, and what's the risk to the perpetrator? We know this guy hasn't been interviewed yet because of his medical state. That's presumably because he's had a reaction to being tasered.
No, I think it's actually the crash, when he crashed the car into the side of the house.
Which was... so he was well enough to run around at that point, but not well enough...
I think he's swinging the lead.
Yeah, but can there be physical effects of being tasered?
There can. In extreme cases, it can interfere with things like irregular heart rhythm and things like that. But those occasions are very, very rare. And to be honest, anybody with a medical condition such that taser is likely to exacerbate it shouldn't really be running around situations where they're likely to be tasered anyway. Most problems with taser, most injuries with taser come from where someone falls to the ground, which you have little control over. Officers are taught not to be tasering people, say, at the top of a steep flight of stairs or something like that, because obviously there's a very much more significant risk of injury if they fall from height at the point where they're tasered. But sometimes that's just not an option. If the person is where the person is, and if that's the only opportunity you've got of stopping them, then that opportunity has to be taken. Bear in mind that the alternative would be the use of firearms, and a lead bullet is far more damaging than anything a taser is ever going to provide.
Well, of course, I'm just reading some of the messages from our viewers here, Peter, and they are saying we should just have armed police officers, and we should be shooting these people. The anger is real when you watch those pictures, and particularly with the loss of a child.
Well, it's when he's a 14-year-old boy and just on his way to school.
That's right. So I understand that instinct to want to arm as many police officers as possible, but the only good thing about yesterday is that it wasn't a shootout in either direction, because we have done a very good job in this country of keeping firearms possessions low. Would that change, do you think, if the police routinely had more guns?
I suspect it probably would. It would take time, but over time, the equalisation of arms available would be expected to even up. So it's not something. Certainly not something that I think we're near yet. There are a significant number of steps between where we are and having officers routinely armed on patrol that we need to take. And like I said, at the moment, I think the situation is that we need all emergency response vehicle crews equipped with taser, whether that's both officers or one officer, preferably both, but certainly one officer on every armed incident response vehicle, with armed response vehicles spread around so that there is an emergency response within whatever the force's emergency response time is, 10 or 12 minutes or whatever. There should be an armed response with at least 4 officers able to respond to that within that 10 to 12 minute window. And that's going to present a lot of difficulties outside big urban areas and cities. Rural areas, it's going to be need some imagination to work out how to do that. But these incidents can happen anywhere. We look at historically some of the most outrageous armed incidents. We look at places like Hungerford and rural Cumbria.
Dunblane.
So these things can happen anywhere. And so we need 24-hour availability everywhere in the country of an armed response to a certain level. But the emergency response, as soon as officers turn up with blue lights and 2 tones, there should be officers with taser in that response.
Peter, can I ask you a personal question? You were a police officer for a very long time, and I think tasers were introduced in Britain in 2003, something like that. Did you ever deploy a taser?
No, I didn't. Tasers came at the time that I was leaving the force.
Right.
But bear in mind the speed with which we had developed from simply having a truncheon, and we weren't even issued handcuffs when I started. So from going from a truncheon through the 90s, we saw new batons being introduced, the extendable batons and the fixed side handle batons. That increased the availability of something with which you could at least have some chance of defending yourself and bringing something to the floor. But the CS spray, the incapacitant spray, came in the mid-90s as well. So it's all come quite quickly.
We're just before we go, Peter, we're watching this footage here of these officers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 of them at this point. What impact will this experience have had on them? How will they be feeling this morning?
Traumatised. You do not go through something like this without huge levels of adrenaline and the down that follows when that adrenaline wears off. They'll have seen colleagues, probably colleagues that they've worked with and work with on a daily basis, seriously injured. And they'll be thinking how much worse that could have been. They'll be thinking, could it have been me? And so the impact is traumatic. And those officers should, I hope, be getting all the post-incident support that they need. I suspect their supervisors will need to fight for that in some cases. Really?
So that's not readily available for officers after an incident like this?
It's more available than it used to be, but there's still huge gaps in provision. I remember a time when occupational health within the Metropolitan Police Service was so bad, and part of the reason was the occupational health therapists were under so much pressure that they were off sick with stress. So it's better than it was, but there's still a very significant hole in support for officers with this, and it can have an impact that goes on and follows them around for years and years and years, and maybe will only flare up unexpectedly at some time in the future. So that is definitely something that needs looking at.
All right, thank you very much. Former Detective Chief Inspector at the Met, Peter Kirkham there.
They use them extensively in the United States, where they were invented, of course, and organisations like Amnesty rage against them because they think they're illiberal and they think they're disproportionately used against members of the black community. But I think they're essential.
I'd rather have those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the moment, we've got such a hideous mental health issue with people going psychotic, having psychotic episodes and creating such horrendous grief
of
and
course,
drama.
we don't know what
Trauma.
we don't know the details yesterday, but those two police officers who bravely confronted the lunatic with the sword have both got very serious injuries in hospital, and perhaps if they'd had tasers, they might have been able to down him a lot earlier.
Well, thank goodness for our police officers here.
Yeah,
We spend
they
a
do a
lot of
great
time criticising... Actually, we don't spend a lot of time criticising.
we've
We
tried to be
criticise the
fair.
system,
Yeah.
and we criticise the reductions in resources.
And the bosses who make their operational decisions to take them off the streets and put them staring at computer screens looking for hate crimes.
Graham, interestingly, Graham, who's a member of GB News, thank you very much, Graham, says tasers are not foolproof. There are enough US videos showing tasers failing and officers having to resort to firearms. You feel like it might be a little bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, but I think it's deterrent effect. If somebody's waving a taser at you, you're more likely to drop your club or your stick or whatever it is, and you're more likely to give in, because I actually think it's pretty painful.
Right, keep your messages coming this morning. We'd love to hear from you. But up next.
It's the Scottish Government. It continues the crisis up there in the Holyrood Parliament. There's a no-confidence vote this afternoon. For all our Scottish viewers in particular and listeners, do you have confidence in the SNP government hanging on with the support of those Greens? Let us know what you think. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams. And it's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently, it's been made from organic fruits growing in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it, I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her products. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So why did
sales has gone through the roof.
Why did they go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying, we don't want your jam, we're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow-style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website, Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth style, New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess, so she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with a cooking show as well on Netflix. She's coming out with a cooking show. And she's, I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking. But I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So, are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist? Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Just so you know, we've got Monty Panesar, cricketer, going to be in the studio to talk about his foray into politics.
I'm glad we're talking about that and not cricket, because I don't know much about it, other than that he was a spinner, whatever that means.
Well, I guess it meant he threw the ball and managed to get a bit of spin on it.
Well, he was very successful. English Test cricketer.
Call me as a commentator.
So we will tell you which party he's representing and which constituency he's fighting. He'll be with us quite soon in the studio.
Right, now, though, the Scottish Government faces a no-confidence vote later today after First Minister Humza Yousaf said that he would resign.
His resignation on Monday came just 13 months after he replaced Nicola Sturgeon, who'd been leader of the SNP for far too long, in my view.
That's right, the crisis in the SNP gives an opportunity for the UK opposition Labour Party to regain ground ahead of a national election expected later this year.
So GBNews Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is at Holyrood and will be there live for that no-confidence vote. Tony, it all depends, I guess, whether the Greens, who fell out with Yousaf, support the government in that vote this afternoon.
Indeed, good morning. Certainly, I'm here at Holyrood today for the duration, and as you might be able to see, TV viewers behind me, that, you know, the fog and the mist is descending. A lovely metaphor for just how obscured the SNP's future is in government at this point. Certainly, we're just under 48 hours since the resignation of Humza Yousaf, and today, Wednesday, we've got two main stories really dominating the political track. One, of course, is those no-confidence votes. Now, that was one of two last week. We saw just after Humza Yousaf effectively torpedoed the Butte House Agreement, turning the SNP into minority government. Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, he lodged his no-confidence vote in Humza Yousaf. Now, Douglas Ross, he withdrew that yesterday, but Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar, well, he maintains as late as yesterday that he still has no confidence in this government. But one of the key factors here is whether the Greens and indeed Alba's MSP Ash Regan, whether they will vote with the government just to retain a pro-independence government up here in Scotland for, let's say, 2 more years until the scheduled Scottish elections in 2026. Now, I asked Anas Sarwar yesterday how much of this he had been thinking about in the lead up to today's crucial vote.
Well, it's of course for other political parties to decide how they vote in any motion, but it's for the Greens and the Alba MSP to decide, is it more important to them keeping a nationalist pro-independence government in place, even though they themselves accept it's an incompetent, failing government? Or is it more important to give Scotland a competent government that is actually changing Scotland and improving the lives of people across the country? That's for them to decide. I am very clear, though, this is not an SNP government that has the confidence of the Scottish people. It's not an SNP government that can give a stable, competent government. It's a tired SNP government that is out of ideas, out of road, a deeply chaotic, divided, dysfunctional political party that people are turning away from because they demand change and they demand competent, stable government.
Now, we'll wait to hear the outcome of that vote, and of course we'll also wait to hear who will be standing for Humza Yousaf's replacement. Lots of action expected later today here at Holyrood.
All right, that's Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter outside the Holyrood Parliament, where there will be that no-confidence vote. So I'm pretty sure, actually, they will weather the storm. But then, of course, you've got to choose the leader to replace Yousaf. I'm quite sure Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon said when Theresa May and Boris Johnson stood down in his trust there had to be a general election. Funny how it's different rules for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've just been reading your messages. We will get to them in just a minute. gbnews.com/your say is the portal where you can talk to me and Andrew, and we'll read them all. And we'll read them all now while we get your weather with Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud today with some showers, but there'll be more heavy rain arriving into the south overnight, even some thunderstorms. Initially, the best of any sunshine will be across the western parts, and there'll be some decent sunny spells around during the morning. Northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales keep those sunny spells well into the afternoon. Otherwise, increasing amounts of cloud arrive from the east with some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, parts of central and eastern England. But away from the showery rain, actually it's going to be relatively warm, particularly where we get some sunshine through central parts, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, temperatures up into the high teens, perhaps even 20, 21 Celsius. Nevertheless, looking towards the south into the evening, we've got this area of heavy rain moving up, perhaps even some thunderstorms across some southern counties of England into South Wales during the early hours of tomorrow. And those thunderstorms could be accompanied by frequent lightning, some very heavy rainfall. Be a noisy night in places, but they'll be hit and miss, and they will be clearing away across South Wales and the southwest of England during the morning tomorrow, leaving a legacy of low cloud and outbreaks of drizzly rain. Elsewhere, brighter skies develop after a mostly dry night. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of central and eastern England, but some parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland will be affected by low cloud. That will make things feel much cooler.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, up next, the first failed asylum seeker sent to Rwanda is under a voluntary scheme.
I find it hilarious.
Know how many thousands of pounds it's cost you, the taxpayer, to send him. Bit of government spin? Might be.
One guy, money in his back pocket, got on the plane, went to Rwanda. Talk about that in just a moment.
It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Flintshire, the A541 remains closed in both directions at Mould after a fire. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the inside lane's closed northbound, but someone's broken down between junctions 24 and 25 from Kegworth to the A52. It's very slow towards and past there. On the M5 in Worcestershire, the inside lane's closed southbound with an accident just before junction 8 for the M50, causing delays. The M4 in Newport is partly blocked westbound between junctions 27 and 28 from High Cross to Tredegar Park, with queues from junction 25 at Caerleon. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed each way again today for repairs near junction 5, causing queues, with 5 miles of queues too on the M26 approaching the M25. In Hampshire, on the M271, there's a lane closed northbound. There's an accident between junction 1 and the M27, causing delays heading out of Southampton. And in Dorset, Ashley Road in Boscombe's closed because of an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of May. How is it May already? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, is it time to arm all police officers with tasers? We're asking this after the man tased and arrested after multiple stabbings in North East London remains in custody. He still hasn't been questioned by the police.
And Rwanda success. A failed asylum seeker, one of them, has been relocated to Rwanda after taking part in a voluntary removal scheme. We will tell you in a minute how much money he got paid to go.
And in the US, police in riot gear have raided Columbia University as more pro-Palestinian protesters have occupied one of its buildings. It's a big row about closing down debate.
And the former England cricketer sports star Monty Panesar is turning his hand to politics. We're going to be trying to stump him with some questions shortly. That was actually a sports joke. I mean, we obviously didn't write that because we don't really know much about cricket.
I've never watched a cricket match ever.
I went to the Ashes once because I happened to be in Australia and then I fell asleep in the stand.
Because it's so boring.
Well, it was hot and I'd had a glass of wine with lunch. It was very boring.
I have been to Lord's and they've got a museum and the Ashes were there. They're in a tiny little egg cup.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. So they're waving. Because it's the bells, isn't it? They are... The Ashes are the burnt bells which are on a stump. I do know that.
Luckily, we'll be talking to Monty Panesar about politics and his ambitions in that area rather than cricket. But let us know what you want to hear from him. gbnews.com/your say. And first, though, your very latest news with Sophia.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley has said a female police officer came close to losing her hand after a 14-year-old boy was killed and others injured in a sword attack in North East London. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. Former Met Police detective Peter Blexley urges police to look into the suspect's background.
I sincerely hope that the police investigation into the background of the man arrested yesterday is very thorough in that it explores any potential illegal drug use. I have no evidence to suggest that that man has gone down that route in the past, but I am strongly suggesting that that investigation must look at that. If this man is to later claim diminished responsibility through a mental illness, and if there is a history of drug taking in the past, that might negate that.
A failed asylum seeker volunteering to go to Rwanda is a positive development as it shows the country is safe. That's according to the business secretary. Kemi Badenoch confirmed the failed asylum seeker was flown out to Kigali in Rwanda yesterday. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. This scheme is said to be separate to a forced deportation programme due to start in July. Labour has criticised the move, accusing the government of being desperate to get any flight off the ground before the local elections. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch said the scheme is working.
I think we should remember that we're spending £8 million a day on this issue. That is not something that is sustainable. We have to deal with it. People said the Rwanda scheme wouldn't work. They tried to say that it wasn't a safe country. If it wasn't a safe country, we wouldn't have people volunteering to go. This shows that the scheme is working. People go to Rwanda on holiday. I know someone who's gone there on a gap year. We need to actually make sure that this scheme works. And that's what the Prime Minister is focusing on, getting people on those flights and getting them over there.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of immigration offences after 5 migrants died trying to cross the English Channel last week. The National Crime Agency said a 23-year-old Sudanese national was arrested on suspicion of assisting illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. It comes as 2 other men from South Sudan and Sudan were charged over the incident. 3 men and a woman and a 7-year-old girl died after the dinghy carrying more than 100 people got into difficulties off the coast of northern France. And some breaking news. Some pro-Palestinian demonstrators are protesting outside the Department of Trade and other sites across the UK. 1,000 workers and trade unionists are also rallying outside. They say there is a show of solidarity with Palestinian workers. And we'll bring you more on this as we get it. Meanwhile, in the US, police in riot gear have raided Columbia University and arrested pro-Palestinian protesters occupying one of its buildings. Around 30 to 40 people have been removed from the Manhattan University's Hamilton Hall, according to police there. Handcuffed protesters shouted "Shame on you" at the police as they were led out and driven away in buses nearly 24 hours after they took over the academic building. House prices fell for the second month in a row in April as potential buyers continued to face pressure on affordability. The UK's biggest building society said the UK house prices were down by 0.4% compared with the previous month. Nationwide said the average house price now sits some 4% below the peak in the summer of 2022, costing on average £261,962. Nationwide's chief economist, Robert Gardner, said the slowdown likely reflects ongoing affordability pressures. And a new prostate cancer screening initiative is being called a pivotal moment that could save thousands of lives. The Transform project aims to reduce deaths from the disease by 40%, with doctors collating data to help make treatments more effective. Prostate cancer kills 12,000 men in Britain each year. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning.
Yeah, it's 10:07. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So you've been getting in touch at home. Gary has said, good morning, Andrew and Bev. As someone who's voted SNP at every election, I've lost faith in the government. The rot set in after Alex Salmond resigned and the catastrophic pact with the Greens, the Alba Party, next for me. And Ian, on the same issue, if ever there was a party that strayed off course, it is the SNP. They're against huge opposition. They've pushed the globalist agenda of wokery and totally disregarded Scottish people.
I just got to tell you a great letter in the Times today from Jim Sillars, former MP. He was deputy leader of the SNP in Edinburgh, doyen of the SNP, and he says people that basically they've had enough of the fixation on pronouns instead of learning in schools, of pretending men are women, and of the absurdity of believing that a Highland of burning wood in a stove can save the planet, while in China, India and elsewhere, they don't care. Spot on.
Life expectancy in Glasgow is now less than in some developing African nations.
And the worst deaths from drugs in the whole of Europe.
Yeah. Nigel, who is a GB News member, thank you, Nigel, you get all sorts of extra bonuses, says the SNP is a cult which demands blind obedience. Driven by an anti-English grievance, they form alliances with literally anyone who is anti-the UK. They've received hardly any donations, yet cling on to power by abusing the UK taxpayers' largesse. Reverse devolution now, it's a nightmare up here. Thank you, Nigel.
And, of course, we shouldn't forget also the chaos over the arrest and now charging of Peter Murrells, who was the SNP chief executive, who just happened to be married to the SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon. What a spectacular fall from grace she's had.
Absolutely.
And, of course, Humza Yousaf, who was dubbed Humza Useless, not by the press, but by his own sister, was her choice to be her successor. Well, didn't it?
And Sharon's saying, I don't know why Bev's finding it so hilarious when we're talking about Rwanda. £3,000 is a bargain if you consider what it would cost the welfare state to support him. Do you know why, Sharon? Because it's like satire. We've been talking about this Rwanda issue for so long, and admittedly, this isn't part of the main scheme. This is the voluntary section. But the fact that we've sent one man, and the fact that the government have even let us know it's one man, it's like... It's genuinely like parody. But I agree with you. £3,000 in his back pocket and board and lodgings for 5 years, though, and a seat on a commercial flight. You're right, that is nothing compared to...
As long as he doesn't come back.
Putting people in... How many times can you come back and get your £3,000? Sorry.
Well,
You've got to laugh, you'd cry.
Let's do some more on this, because as we've just said, the UK has sent the first migrant to Rwanda, where he flew out to Kigali in Rwanda last night on a commercial flight.
That's right. His asylum bid was rejected last year. He voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation and got that £3,000 for doing so.
Now, this is separate to the forced deportation programme, which has finally cleared all its parliamentary stages, and which we now know is paying dividends because of the migrants leaving Northern Ireland going to Southern Ireland, because they fear they might go to Rwanda. Well, let's talk to the British editor of the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Kevin, you and I have seen political spin in our time, and we've had political spin doctors try and spin us with varying degrees of success, I'm sure. Is this a piece of political spin to say this is a great breakthrough for the government in its Rwanda policy?
Yeah, I think it's epic spin. As you say, Andrew, this is completely separate from the actual Rwanda policy, the bill that passed last week. I mean, I don't know if you can call this deportation if someone voluntarily gets on a plane with £3,000 in their wallet and, as you say, has their bed and board paid for the next 5 years. That doesn't sound like deportation to me. So, yeah, I can understand from the government's point of view why they want to say, look, we got someone on a plane to Rwanda. But, you know, this is going to have absolutely no impact at all on what this is meant to be all about, which is stopping the boats, because we're led to believe that this person didn't even come over on a small boat. So, so yeah, I don't think this. I can understand, as I said, I can understand why the government want to, blow their own trumpet about this, but it's pretty farcical, really.
Where do they get the figure £3,000 from? I'm curious. Look, I get the person who was emailing and saying if they stayed here, they'd be a huge burden on the benefit system. But, Kevin, why £3,000? Why not £2,000 or maybe £4,500? Where do they get that number from?
That's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure. I guess this is a number that's been agreed upon by civil servants as a reasonable amount to get someone set up to begin with. In Rwanda, as we say, they're getting their board and lodgings paid for as well. So I guess £3,000 will probably do you quite well in Rwanda initially until you can find your feet. And, obviously, in terms of the overall government budget, it's a tiny, tiny amount of money. But £3,000 is £3,000, and it's not bad if you can get it.
One of our viewers, and I've lost the message just for now, but I will find it to name this person, and she says that she supports a child in Rwanda, one of those voluntary schemes, for about £35 a month, I think it was. So she said £3,000 will get you a very, very long way in Rwanda.
It'll probably buy a limousine.
And this is the thing is, Kevin, this is the difficult line, isn't it? This has to appear like a deterrent, and yet they're also selling it like a package holiday with free money thrown in. How can it be both?
Well, you're right. It can't be both. It can't be enough of a deterrent to stop people crossing the channel, but at the same time be a fantastic place for you to want to go and live. Both things can't be true. So yeah, I'm just wondering whether it's a bit ill-advised, really, for whoever the spin doctor was who gave this great scoop. Harry Cole at the Sun, hats off to Harry for getting this scoop, but I just wonder whether in the final reckoning they might wish that they hadn't pushed it quite as hard as they have.
While we've got you, can we ask a few other political questions? We've got Monty Panesar coming in later. He's going to stand in a seat in London for...
I think you live there, Kevin.
George Galloway's Workers' Party. How worried... It's your patch, isn't it? Well, you've got to...
Come to my door.
Yeah, he'll be knocking on your door, I'm sure he will, with his cricket bat. How worried... I've written about this a lot in the Mail, and I think there's quite a lot of concern in the Labour Party that people standing as independents, like Monty Panesar, basically on a position opposing Labour's position on the war in Gaza because Starmer won't support an unconditional ceasefire, that this could cause real problems for Labour. We know Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary's got a candidate against him. We saw that Galloway himself won the by-election in Rochdale against the odd. Is this a real worry for Labour?
I think they are concerned, and they'll be looking very closely at the local election results on Thursday in the north of England, where we've had Labour councillors resign from the party over Gaza and Keir Starmer's approach to the Middle East. So, yeah, I think they will be concerned. I mean, at this stage, I wouldn't say there's probably going to be enough of a movement that would probably deprive Labour of any seats at all, probably in a general election. However, locally, it could well mean that they don't get councillors that they otherwise would have got. And, if this becomes a groundswell, then it's definitely something that Keir Starmer needs to be aware of.
What should we ask Monty Panesar about your constituency when he comes into the studio? What's important to the people of Ealing, your area of Ealing?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, there's not much really that is at the top of the political agenda. We're quite a peaceable, calm lot.
You've got all those traffic calming schemes, though, Kevin.
Well,
all those bollards.
One thing that did actually cause political controversy a couple of years ago now was the low traffic neighbourhoods, the LTNs. Yeah. But there was a change in the council leadership and they got rid of a lot of them. So you might want to ask him whether or not he would look to bring them back. And do you get weekly bin collections or are they fortnightly bin collections? This is bread and butter issues. Yeah. No, absolutely. The potholes, actually, now I come to think of it, the potholes are a problem. Write this down. As I suppose they are everywhere. So you might want to ask him about potholes. Yeah, we do get weekly. It's sort of 1 week it's the rubbish and 1 week it's your recycling. That's not good enough. Food bins get collected once a week as well, so it's not really that bad. We'll quiz him on that for you,
and you've got good schools. You've got very good schools in your area, though, don't you? Great state schools.
Yeah, we do indeed, Bev. You can tell that we've discussed this off camera before. Yeah, you're right. It's very, very good. I'm very lucky to have a very good local primary school here.
Yeah. Well, there might be a bit of work for him to do. How do you think he would go down knocking on the doors? Would people know who Monty Panesar is?
I would imagine, yeah, if you're a cricket fan, you're absolutely guaranteed to know who he was. It would probably a little bit of stardust in a political contest is never a bad thing. But, yeah, I think he faces a massive uphill battle. Labour have got this seat nailed down, I think.
Yeah. OK, all right. Thank you, Kevin. Great to see you. Kevin Schofield there. So
talking about sportsmen in politics, they just haven't been hugely successful over the years.
No. Do you think I should also confess that my ex-husband, who is a sportsman, is standing in the next...
He is.
The next election.
He's standing in Colchester, a seat where the Tory MP Will Quince is standing down, and I think Will's standing down because he thinks he was going to lose. So
might my ex-husband.
I did bump into your husband at a reception, and I said, ex-husband, who's your threat, Labour or Liberal Democrat? He said Labour. I said, sorry, you're out.
And the thing is, right, as a sportsman... What you want is an objective gold medal. There's a finish line, right? It's not subjective, and that's what I think sportsmen find hard about politics. You can't really control the outcome.
No.
You can do what you can do, but you can knock on all the doors.
They find it very frustrating.
They find it really frustrating.
Where is the winning line?
Exactly. It doesn't feel fair if they lose, but anyway, I'm quite glad I'm not a politician's wife anymore.
Now, we're still talking about should all police officers have tasers. This is in the aftermath of the shocking events in Hainault yesterday. Those two police officers who first confronted the man with the sword ended up in hospital with very serious injuries. They did not have tasers with them. So should we give them all of them? I think we should.
Don't go anywhere. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this was a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Very good morning, it's 10:20. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
We've got our regular panel, Mike Parry, Brett Jonas and Rage Centre, and the former Labour MP Stephen Pan. And Judy Stephen, we must ask you immediately. We have Monty Panesar coming in today. He's going to be standing in a constituency that neighbouring yours when you were an MP.
Absolutely, yeah.
You were Ealing...
I was Ealing North. And he's my good friend Verinda Sharma, he's the MP for Ealing Southall, and Monty, but, you know, but I have to say, not the first spinner we've had in, in politics, but... but it's interesting, because what's fascinating about this, he's standing for George Galloway's party of the day. I mean, who knows what George Galloway's party of tomorrow will be, but, you know, at the moment, it's this one, the Workers' Party. And when Monty was asked about, particularly about the issue of Gaza, which is, as you know, the thing that runs through the whole Galloway effort like a stick of rock. So he said, "Oh, I'll leave that to George."
Well, that's all right.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to be over foreign policy. He's got to do the.
Well, hang on a second. The whole
schools.
George. Yeah, I agree.
Just talking to Kevin
Schofield,
who was talking about the bread and butter issues there.
Yeah,
weekly bin collection.
Potholes.
How much?
Which your old councillor's not done very well on, Stephen.
I'm saying we're one of the better councils, oddly enough. Yeah, but you know how much of George Galloway's speech when he won in Rochdale was to do with potholes or schools? It was all to do with Gaza.
But maybe that's why you need some balance in the party then, right? You can do George...
Now that is good spin.
I think he's very brave to go into politics as a cricketer, because the only other famous cricketer in politics is now in jail, isn't he, Imran Khan? 10 years or something.
Ted Dexter stood for the Tories a couple of times.
Against Jim Callaghan, that went well.
That's right. How in the hell do you know that?
Because I just showed him a little bit earlier.
Cardiff Central.
Yeah, the constituency well.
Yeah. I don't think any footballers ever entered politics, but that's probably because they're retired.
Tried to.
As multi-millionaires. He did, but only at a local level, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've never had ambitions.
Well, we tried to sign up Brian Clough. Brian Clough was going to be a Labour candidate twice, but he never turned up for the meeting.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and Brian Clough said famously, when I become an MP, because somebody had criticised him for having the top-of-the-range expensive Mercedes, he said, if I become an MP, everybody will have one.
Yeah. But you know what? Isn't it funny, though, because you would think that politics would appeal to sports people.
Well, they're so wealthy now, you see.
Standing in Colchester.
Yeah, but they retire now so wealthy.
But this is the thing.
What, politicians?
No, footballers.
Oh, footballers.
Footballers, I get it. But you think Olympic sports people. Why? Because it's a competition. It's a race, and they love a competition.
Yes, they do.
Well, hang on, there is that footballer who's flirting with Labour and he's joined the Labour Party. Neville. Gary Neville. I'm not sure who he played for.
I'm not sure he's actively. I mean, he's very socialist in his beliefs.
Yeah.
And he's a huge capitalist. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, he's got huge property investments. He's got companies that make big money. Good luck to him in all that.
Yeah.
But his views are all socialist. But I think you'll find that with the job he's got, sitting in a TV studio and talking about football, it would be a bit of a fag to go out on the street and start knocking on doors.
Well, hang on a second. I served in Parliament with an Olympic gold medalist, and she was Tanny Gray Thompson.
Of course.
And she was in the House of Lords when I was in the Commons, and she made a huge contribution to the politics. So I mean, there are people who can, hand out. And Sebastian Coe was it? He was.
Well, he was a one-term. He was in for one term.
Yeah, no.
Well, as an MP,
his office.
He was William Hague's chief of staff.
Yeah.
Well, that went spectacularly well, didn't it?
Yeah,
well, not particularly, but I mean, his office was very, very long way, and the chap who took over his office in '97 complained he couldn't get in to vote in time because he only had 8 minutes to get to vote. He said, well, Sebastian Coe managed to do it
because he ran
running down the corridor.
I think Sebastian Coe, I'm told, came up with the idea of telling William Hague to wear a baseball cap.
That went well, didn't it? And the log flume.
Yeah.
Right.
That was down at that leisure park in Cornwall.
OK, Mike, so the first failed asylum seeker went to Rwanda yesterday, packed his bags.
Yeah. This is incredible timing, isn't it? With the mayoral elections coming up tomorrow, and this was sneaked out in the Sun on the front page this morning. I mean, look, I just have huge admiration for all these people on the Tory side of politics who've persisted with it. They can now say, we've got somebody in Rwanda. The old joke about...
One, Mike, it's embarrassing.
Sorry, £3,000 and 5 years more than logic.
But excuse me, as far as I'm concerned, the seal's now broken and the system is up and running, and they got them out there without anybody knowing, so all the legal protests weren't able to be put into place.
That's a very good point, actually.
Right?
That's a very good point.
They did it behind the scenes. They got out there. They've only announced it now there. If they'd announced it, we're sending this chap because he's volunteered, there would now be a huge court case.
But surely there won't be protests against voluntary
I mean, that would be quite difficult, because the great thing here is that, firstly, it's one person. Secondly, you can use a commercial airliner. And you're trying to do that with 20, 30 people. If you're going to deport one person at a time, we'll probably get this done in 230 years.
But
who knows who'll be the leader of the Tory
Party? Stephen, you know, and it's making, and I can sense the panic amongst Labour MPs. What's happening in the north of Ireland? They're crossing the border, which all the fuss about. There must be no cameras there post-Brexit. They're crossing the border into the south of Ireland because they fear being deported to Rwanda. And now the wretched Irish government is saying they're going to legislate so they can send them back to Britain. And it's because Rwanda is proving to be a deterrent. What are Labour going to do about that? They said we're going to abolish the policy, even if it works.
What we'll do is it's a reciprocal arrangement. If we are going to allow home country deportations, then we'll have the same thing.
Yeah, but France won't take back ours. So how does that work? Once this chap gets there, and once the Pride of Fleet Street get out there and start talking to him, and once he says, this is a wonderful life, I'm by the swimming pool, and they're paying for me for 3 years, they'll be going there in droves.
But did you see, there's a story in the Times today about, there's this huge camp that's set up in Dublin from these people who are now...
And they keep them in tents rather than hotels.
The Irish government give them tents. Well, they have a huge housing crisis. And this chap, he's from Jordan, and they said, well, why are you fleeing? He said, I committed adultery with my neighbour's wife, and her family are going to kill me. And that's a reason for seeking asylum in this country? Come on.
Wow.
And it's a lovely picture. He's sitting there smoking some counterfeit cigarettes and heating up this stove for his morning coffee.
We talked to that lovely human rights lawyer who, when we don't have a big fight with, David Hay, down in the West Country, who admits that 80% of the asylum cases he's dealt with, they've been bogus. They've made it up. They've lied.
Or they wouldn't have reason to stay.
No,
80%.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched on something there, Andrew. Labour are terrified of the Rwanda policy even looking like it's going to work, in case people think, actually, they've been rubbishing it all along, and now...
They've voted against it 134 times.
Exactly.
It is a ridiculous, expensive gimmick that has absolutely no long-term benefit whatsoever.
Well,
it's a gimmick.
The proof is in the pudding.
And Stephen's solution is, we're going to get the gangs.
No,
we're going to get the
what we're going to do, you talked about 80% being bogus, 20% that case are genuine, so with those 20% should be processed in work and paying tax.
What about kicking out the 80% of bogus? Why didn't you say that?
Well, we can do the same thing. If we properly process, we get the Home Office working, then we can differentiate between the sheep and the goats.
And Monty Panesar is saying...
what Labour did...
We've got to deport illegal asylum seekers. That's what Monty Panesar is saying.
That's right.
The Labour rival won't be saying that.
I'm sorry, deport them to Tehran, deport them to Kabul.
Smashing the gangs, by the way, which is Labour's refrain all the time. We'll smash the gangs. The gangs are so clever that, a few... it dried up a bit, the market on the continent, so they've gone to Vietnam. They're recruiting refugees from Vietnam. That's how active the gangs are. It's $1 billion industry around the world, and anything you do to try and, quote, smash the gangs, another gang will arise.
And as long as we have unregulated...
It's the fastest growing number.
As long as we have unregulated labour in this country, and anybody can come here without any documentation...
I know.
And get a job
No identity cards.
Keep their heads down, and then they have this thing called the regularisation of overstayers protocol, where after 3 or 4 years, even if you're illegal, you can say you set down routes. The legal stuff has to be changed.
Can we?
I agree.
I just want to move on because we've got other stories we want to talk about. Can we talk about your prostates, gentlemen?
Yes, definitely.
Are you sitting comfortably?
So there's a new screening method which might cut deaths by 40%.
Yeah, fantastic.
What is it?
Well, the problem with prostate problems is there's never been a proper medical way of diagnosing it. And in fact, some doctors advise don't go and get a PSA test, as it's called, the PSA test, because they're not always accurate. Now, funny enough, about a year ago, I thought, waterworks seemed to be a bit unstable. Went and got it, and I got a reading of 3. And if you get anything under 5, you're safe, OK? But the doctor did say to me, come back in 6 months, we'll do it again. We're not always certain. This is a much better way of doing it.
And you need to do it because men are rubbish about getting tested, because unlike women, all great, but they're very bad, they're very squeamish. It's not an easy test, it's not a particularly nice test.
And, do you have to have a finger up your bum now still, or not?
No, so it's not all bad news. So listen, the real heroes here, I think, amazingly, and you won't hear this very often, are Premier League football managers. For the last 4 years, every single Premier League football manager on Match of the Day has been wearing one of those badges.
That's absolutely right.
And raising. And I have to say, a lot of people I know who never would have thought about it, they can actually see the role models there.
And the thing is,
certainly I go in on a fairly regular basis. It's not unpleasant.
12,000 men a year, unnecessarily.
That's extraordinary,
because often you don't...
Early diagnosis.
You don't know you've got the symptoms.
So it's not dissimilar in that case, then, to a cervical smear test, that if you are assessed early, then you have an excellent prognosis.
Well, it's now by royal appointment anyway.
But you're absolutely right. There are no symptoms. I mean, sometimes you detect blood in the urine or something like that. But a mate of mine suddenly found out he had, like, stage 3 prostate cancer simply through another routine medical test he was having, and they detected it, but there were no symptoms, and that's the very worst thing about it.
I mean, nocturnal micturation and inability to flow.
Well, the problem is that can get confused with old age.
Indeed, it can.
You know what I mean?
Or you've drunk too much before you've gone to bed.
Or it can be, as they said, I wish I had the tongue of Homer to speak of rectal carcinoma.
The point is here, chaps, if you're listening or watching, get tested, because it really is one of the ones they can get rid of.
No, absolutely. And actually, you can live without a prostate gland. Your life changes, but you can live without it. So you're absolutely right. Just go and get it taken out, because that means you won't die.
Andrew, I take a thing called tamsulosin every morning, and that will actually I had the test about 2 years ago, and they said there's a propensity for that. Take tamsulosin, and that will actually keep you, make all the problems that are referred to go away. And because I used to go out for a walk, and I'd have to be hiding behind a bush every couple of hours. And I've just done 100 miles in northern Spain without needing to.
Well done.
But no, that's neither here nor there. But the point is, medically, you can now treat it. But the key thing, that's over and over. You're right to mention it. Early diagnosis.
That's right. Which is what the King was saying only yesterday.
But you and the King very often speak from the same hymn.
A member of my family had exactly the same problem, Stephen, walking around the Isle of Wight and having to go behind a wall and all that. Eventually, on the waiting list, he paid £15,000 privately and got the laser treatment on it, which has solved it.
Got to make your
right, we've got to go to the news, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And we might ask you about your 100-mile walk when we come back in the next hour.
And he bought us a very nice present.
Stephen, he bought us a very...
Didn't buy me one.
I know he didn't.
Right, Sophia's waiting very patiently. We're wearing the same colour pink. Here she is with the news.
Bev, thank you. From the GB Newsroom at 10:33, your headlines. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley has said a female police officer came close to losing her hand after a 14-year-old boy was killed and others injured in a sword attack in north-east London. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. A failed asylum seeker volunteering to go to Rwanda is a positive development as it shows the country is safe. That's according to the Business Secretary. Kemi Badenoch confirmed the failed asylum seeker was flown out to Kigali in Rwanda yesterday. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. This scheme is said to be separate to a forced deportation programme due to start in early July. Labour has criticised the move, accusing the government of being desperate to get flights off the ground before the local elections. Kemi Badenoch says the scheme is working.
I think we should remember that we're spending £8 million a day on this issue. That is not something that is sustainable. We have to deal with it. People said the Rwanda scheme wouldn't work. They tried to say that it wasn't a safe country. If it wasn't a safe country, we wouldn't have people volunteering to go. This shows that the scheme is working. People go to Rwanda on holiday. I know someone who's gone there on a gap year. We need to actually make sure that this scheme works. And that's what the Prime Minister is focusing on, getting people on those flights and getting them over there.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2495 and €1.1713. The price of gold is £1,831 and 68 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,160 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, former England superstar cricketer Monty Panesar. He's here, he's in the building.
We're looking forward to talking to him.
Very much looking forward to talking to him. We're going to ask him, we're not going to go easy on him. Why does he want to go into politics? What could he bring to his constituents in Ealing? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the A1 in Tyne and Wear, there's a lane closed southbound after an accident between junctions 75 and 73 from the Dentonburn roundabout to Blaydon, causing delays. Trains have been stopped between Middlesbrough and Saltburn after an accident at a level crossing near Redcar Central Station. In Flintshire, the A541 is closed each way at Mould after a fire yesterday afternoon. The M4 in Newport is partly blocked westbound between junctions 27 and 28 from High Cross to Treacle Park. The queues from junction 25 at Caerleon. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed each way for repairs again today near junction 5 for the M26, causing clockwise delays towards there. There's also a lane closure on the M26 in Kent, westbound just before the M25 with delays there too. And in Dorset, Ashley Road in Boscombe is closed each way after an accident causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza, and also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, To be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's
extreme.
a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
Well, today marks a significant moment for the UK government's Legacy Act. Now, that's designed to end all future prosecutions of veterans related to the troubles going back to the 1960s and 70s in Northern Ireland.
So the act has been opposed by victims groups and all the main political parties in Northern Ireland. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie joins us now. Dougie, for people who will be too young to know what all of this is about, just remind us of the backstory and why this decision is being made now in 2024.
Well, you're exactly right. Those that are too young to remember it. It's been a quarter of a century since the Good Friday Agreement was signed that ended the troubles in Northern Ireland. Now, of course, there were people that were killed and injured in that beforehand. And over the last 25 years, there's been about £2.5 billion spent on court cases, people trying to take action against those that were responsible. Now, I have always came at a story looking at what could cause and effect and how it comes. But in 1998, during those talks, there were letters of comfort and Queen's Pardons of Mercies handed out to those in the IRA. And they, of course, were involved in the killings in Northern Ireland. In fact, they did the majority of them. So every time they would have came to court, that, of course, was then thrown out of court because they had these letters of comfort. So only one side of the community ever really got to find what had happened, and records were always kept by the state through police services and the army that was here. So they, of course, ended up in court most of the time. And when it got to a certain stage then, and state actors were involved in that, i.e. double agents inside the IRA, or the UVF or some of the Protestant paramilitaries that were there, well then the case could go no further. And Canova report that came out a couple of weeks ago actually showed that there was a lot of these state agents that were operating alongside the British state and effectively facilitating some of those paramilitary killings. So they never came to court. So what ended up happening is case after case came here and very few of them give any answers to the victims. So 25 years on, the state has said enough, that's it. We're going to deal anything that hasn't made it to a certain level here so far will be into this new commission, the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery. It's a bit like the Truth Recovery after in South Africa, but there is some very good legal minds at the top of this, and there is some very good ex-police at the top of this, having a look at what's going on. So the British government are asking those victims, please come to us, tell us what you know, we will take your case on and try and get you the answers that really are required. But of course, in the middle of that, the Irish government has taken an intergovernmental legal case against Britain, objecting to this very commission that has been put in place. And many in the community here are saying, well, that's not right either, because the Irish government's hands weren't clean in these troubles either. So it has started a row. It's a continuing row, and on the back of the Rwanda row, relations between London and Dublin are now becoming strained. But from midnight last night, all of these historical cases are now in the hands of the Commission.
OK, thank you so much, Dougie Beattie there. They just feel like a slightly ironic timing, doesn't it, as things are getting a little bit more complicated between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
Well, there's no doubt the row over Rwanda and the immigrants is probably causing the biggest bust-up between Britain and the Irish government since Brexit.
Well, Meghan has got in touch, thank you, Meghan, and she says...
What, Meghan Markle?
No, I don't.
Are you tuning in? No. We're thrilled. Do you want to come on?
Meghan says, hang on, you two. She's right. An illegal immigrant voluntarily going to Rwanda proves that it's a safe country. Good point, Meghan. Well spotted.
And we have to make the point, too, the Irish government court said Britain is no longer a safe country for migrants because of our Rwanda policy. The Irish government is now trying to ignore its own courts.
Yeah.
We heard this row before in this country.
Yeah.
Because they want to send migrants back here, and we're not going to take them, and nor should we.
Francis, who is a GB News member, said, we have the toughest firearms legislation in the world. This is because, of course, we've been reflecting on the awful event in Hainault yesterday. He says, legally, in an overreaction, we have the toughest legislation in the world.
It's because of Dunblane, if you remember, back in the 90s.
Right, sorry, Francis. Yeah, legally, in an overreaction, following Dunblane, Tony Blair, yet again, all pistols were banned affecting Olympic sports like modern pentathlon. Shotgun ownership challenged for sporting purposes like clay pigeon shooting, often for charitable fundraising, pest control, etc. Rifles used for culling. The main issue is illegal imported guns used by drug gangs. Counter to wider weapons is risk of theft or misuse. Shotgun suicide, of course, being one of them. It is a complicated issue, but I think we've done... I know, as he's saying about perhaps the caveats of where it didn't go. I love the fact that we don't have a big gun culture.
Oh, I do too.
It's something we should be very proud of, and we don't give ourselves enough credit as a country for that. And David says 500 people enter on small boats and one leaves on one aeroplane. Actually, it's more than 500, David.
Well, there's
500 over the weekend.
More than 7,000 have arrived this year.
Yeah. And
Look,
here we go. What else have you been saying? Sorry.
Credit where credit. You've just got to hope that it's the start of something.
Yeah. Somebody who calls themselves a reform voter says £3,000 to send one immigrant to Rwanda, but how long would it take to spend that amount of money to keep him here?
It's 3,000.
3,000?
Yeah.
How long would it spend?
Yeah, much more.
To keep him here?
How much are the hotel bills?
But also, to be clear, that £3,000 is only the cash that they've got to go. Oh, like the money in the bank account.
But also, we want to get them out of our hotels. So many hotels now are no-go areas for tourists. Because, and I've seen a few of them in the Brighton area. They've just become very run down and dilapidated. Yeah. They've become a complete eyesore. Yeah. We've got to get them out.
Not working for anybody.
No.
Right, up next, do you like the sound of 30 degrees sunshine here in the UK? We're being warned of a new reality when it comes to high temperatures in London.
Well, we can tell you we know all about that because it's about 40 degrees in this studio at the moment. Bev Turner is threatening to strip off. I hope she's not serious.
Apparently it's bad news, this warm weather. I have to say, I'm a little bit conflicted about that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud today with some showers, but there'll be more heavy rain arriving into the south overnight, even some thunderstorms. Initially, the best of any sunshine will be across the western parts, and there'll be some decent sunny spells around during the morning. Northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales keep those sunny spells well into the afternoon. Otherwise, increasing amounts of cloud arrive from the east with some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, parts of central and eastern England. But away from the showery rain, actually it's going to be relatively warm, particularly where we get some sunshine through central parts, Northern Ireland, western Scotland, temperatures up into the high teens, perhaps even 20, 21 Celsius. Nevertheless, looking towards the south into the evening, we've got this area of heavy rain moving up, perhaps even some thunderstorms across some southern counties of England into South Wales during the early hours of tomorrow. And those thunderstorms could be accompanied by frequent lightning, some very heavy rainfall. A noisy night in places, but they'll be hit and miss, and they will be clearing away across South Wales and the southwest of England during the morning tomorrow, leaving a legacy of low cloud and outbreaks of drizzly rain. Elsewhere, brighter skies develop after a mostly dry night. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of central and eastern England, but some parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland will be affected by low cloud. That'll make things feel much cooler.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. So could London be the next holiday hotspot? The capital is seeing an increase in days where it hits highs of over 30 degrees.
So the International Institute for Environment and Development's new research shows London has experienced 116 days over 30 degrees in the past 3 decades. It said this could be the new reality.
And the Met Office have just issued weather warnings for thunderstorms covering large parts of the UK. Jim Dale.
I just mentioned that, didn't I?
Senior meteorologist is here and the author of Surviving Extreme Weather.
And we've been surviving extreme weather, Jim, because London's been blimmin' freezing this year.
Kind of, yeah. And I did say...
Central heating
I know there'll be viewers saying, oh, you said in April it would all come right and all the rest of it. Well, that was in early March, sort of about the 11th of March, and I was looking forward thinking, this can't last forever, all this rain. Well, it did, didn't it?
Yes, it did. You got it wrong again.
It continues. No, not again. It is a forecast at the end of the day, and anybody who forecasts these things, predictions, sometimes they can fall off a cliff. But I was actually emphasising more the summer, which is now what we're going to be talking about going forward. Lovely if it remains sort of in where we've been normally, which is in the mid-20s. You know, that's a nice day. Even now, when we get sort of 15s and 16s with the sun shining, it's fine. The problem with April, it was dull. It was northerly airstream rather than a southerly airstream, so it's easy forgettable.
If this is happening, Jim, and we can debate about whether we should be changing our fossil fuels, etc. But if this is happening, why aren't we just therefore making structural changes to our business,
what a question.
to our lives? Because that seems inevitable. I'll give you an example. I've recently done up my kids' bedrooms. Rather than just getting a normal light on the ceiling, I've got a light with a fan, so that they can have a bit of air in the summer with in the windows.
Well done.
That's a simple thing that you can do. It doesn't cost you an awful lot more.
Self-help is the starting block of everything. You've got to look independently. So, you know, if you stand up there with your bare chest, not you necessarily, but whoever, saying, you know, I'll stand anything and all, you know, all of that sort of stuff, you've got to think of people, children, people with underlying conditions, poorer people who've got difficulty with their housing, no insulation, all of this sort of stuff. Then that's where it's going to hit. Mostly. And to be frank with you, when you start to see the silly temperatures that we are now seeing in places like Cambodia, Thailand, and you're going to say it's hot there, isn't it? No, it's not. These are record temperatures. 2 days ago in Cambodia, record all-time temperature. It's going on and on. And I think we're going to see some of that more and more. We've been, can I say lucky? Almost to say that we've been in the cool and the wet for some time, because that might be something that we can look back on and say, well, thank God for that, because we're not in drought anymore. We're not of water shortage. But the self-help thing is where it starts. Even, for example, passive greening. I always look at this desk because I come in on the breakfast show sometimes, and they have these 2 plastic dandelion things or whatever they are.
Yes.
Not dandelion.
That's
you know
not very expensive set dressing.
One day I should have done it today. I'm going to bring a proper plant in here.
It'll wilt.
No, come on, look after it. Yeah, I know, I can feel it. It's absolutely just wait till it's 40 degree out there.
I've worked in newspapers for 40 years. People bring in a nice plant, bunch of flowers. They're dead within 2 days.
I'm going to try. Well,
awful. I don't know what it is.
I tell you what.
We just managed to kill everything.
I tell you what. We'll make it a cactus. That'll survive, won't it? There we go.
Nice and spiky.
That'll be appropriate.
Yeah.
Andrew, it's called passive greening, so you can do little things that will help.
We could do that, but what this government does can do nothing to change the temperature in this country. Nothing at all, apart from put people's bills up.
No, I disagree with you. That's the old, you're going to get colder and poorer. I will tell you get colder if you don't have insulation, so that should be a number one going forward, without a shadow of a doubt, to help the poorer people get there. Just a couple of other little things. I talk about passive greening. I go running and walking in woods. It's often... when it's very hot outside, it's very cool in there. When it's very cold outside, it's actually warmer, cool, but warmer in the woods. Get into those areas. We talk about London being the next...
But you see... We sleep in the woods.
No, I'm saying spend more time, and I'm saying plant more trees. It's one way. I'll give you another one, and that is start, you know, little bits and pieces. She's breaking up here, isn't she?
I'm sorry, there's just so much of what we talk about in the news these days just feels like I'm on some sort of comedy show. The solution to the warming planet and the fact we can't all go and hang out in the woods, Jim.
Yeah,
With
well, look,
bears.
to be honest with you, if you're in central London, as we are now, there are places to go on a hot day with the trees and, well, not many of them. You know, Hyde Park and places.
But you know what we're doing instead? We're knocking down trees and putting solar panels.
Yes, we are. But there's nothing wrong with that in one way. We're not necessarily knocking down trees.
We're getting rid of greenery.
Yeah, I mean, it's a progressive thing. That's going to happen. But I'll just mention one thing, and that is, I'll look at the buildings in London, for example. I'm pretty sure it'll be the same in Birmingham, Manchester, and they are. Even here on the canal, I come out the tube station and there's two buildings facing you. You know the two, that really tall black one, and next to it there's a white one. I'll bet you any money in the summertime it's the white one that will be much more preferable to be like the south of Spain.
I think the motto is do what you can for yourself. Get a fandelier. They're very good. I highly recommend them. And sleep in the woods. Don't go anywhere.
Sleep in the woods.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud today with some showers, but there'll be more heavy rain arriving into the south overnight, even some thunderstorms. Initially, the best of any sunshine will be across the western parts, and there'll be some decent sunny spells around during the morning. Northwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales keep those sunny spells well into the afternoon. Otherwise, increasing amounts of cloud arrive from the east with some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, parts of central and eastern England. But away from the showery rain, actually it's going to be relatively warm, particularly where we get some sunshine through central parts, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, temperatures up into the high teens, perhaps even 20, 21 Celsius. Nevertheless, looking towards the south into the evening, we've got this area of heavy rain moving up, perhaps even some thunderstorms across some southern counties of England into South Wales during the early hours of tomorrow. And those thunderstorms could be accompanied by frequent lightning, some very heavy rainfall. A noisy night in places, but they'll be hit and miss, and they will be clearing away across South Wales and the southwest of England during the morning tomorrow, leaving a legacy of low cloud and outbreaks of drizzly rain. Elsewhere, brighter skies develop after a mostly dry night. Plenty of sunshine for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of central and eastern England, but some parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland will be affected by low cloud. That'll make things feel much cooler.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wind-up, is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News, with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 1st of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, from spin bowler to Prime Minister, the former England cricketer Montpassar is turning his hand to politics. He joins us next.
And is it a Rwanda success or is it a bit of spin or a lot of spin? A failed asylum seeker has been relocated to Rwanda after taking part in a voluntary removal scheme. It cost you, the taxpayer, a mere £3,000.
And is it time to arm all police officers with tasers? The man tasered and arrested after multiple stabbings in north-east London yesterday remains in custody, but is yet to be interviewed.
And there's a major breakthrough on prostate cancer. A new screening initiative aims to reduce deaths from the disease by 40%. It's being described as a pivotal moment for men. Well, Monty Panison's in the building.
Here, in the building. We're talking.
Do you know much about cricket?
I know absolutely nothing about cricket.
Nor me. Do you know how many people are in the cricket team? 11, I think.
That's football.
Might be 12.
Don't know. But luckily we aren't talking about cricket.
No.
We're talking about his political ambitions, because he's going to be standing for George Galloway's British Workers' Party in the next election. We're going to be finding out why. Don't go anywhere. But first, your very latest news with Sophia.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. First, some breaking news. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College at 8:50 a.m. this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was given medical attention and 2 adults were also injured. The suspect remains in police custody. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley has said a female police officer came close to losing her hand after a 14-year-old boy was killed and others injured in a sword attack in north-east London. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. Former Met Police detective Peter Blexley urges police to look into the suspect's background.
I sincerely hope that the police investigation into the background of the man arrested yesterday is very thorough in that it explores any potential illegal drug use. I have no evidence to suggest that that man has gone down that route in the past, but I am strongly suggesting that that investigation must look at that. If this man is to later claim diminished responsibility through a mental illness, and if there is a history of drug taking in the past, that might negate that.
In other news, a failed asylum seeker volunteering to go to Rwanda is a positive development as it shows the country is safe. That's according to the Business Secretary. Kemi Badenoch confirmed the failed asylum seeker was flown out to Kigali in Rwanda yesterday. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. The scheme is said to be separate to a forced deportation programme due to start in July. Labour has criticised the move, accusing the government of being desperate to get any flight off the ground before the local elections. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch said the scheme is working.
I think we should remember that we're spending £8 million a day on this issue. That is not something that is sustainable. We have to deal with it. People said the Rwanda scheme wouldn't work. They tried to say that it wasn't a safe country. If it wasn't a safe country, we wouldn't have people volunteering to go. This shows that the scheme is working. People go to Rwanda on holiday. I know someone who's gone there on a gap year. We need to actually make sure that this scheme works. And that's what the Prime Minister is focusing on, getting people on those flights and getting them over there.
Meanwhile, a man has been arrested on suspicion of immigration offences after 5 migrants died trying to cross the English Channel last week. The National Crime Agency said a 23-year-old Sudanese national was arrested on suspicion of assisting illegal immigration and entering the UK illegally. It comes as 2 other men from South Sudan and Sudan were charged over the incident. 3 men and a woman and a 7-year-old girl died after the dinghy carrying more than 100 people got into difficulties off the coast of northern France. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators are protesting outside the Department of Trade in London. 1,000 workers and trade unionists are also rallying outside BAE Systems sites in Glasgow, South Wales and Lancashire. They say their aim is to show solidarity with Palestinian workers. Police say they've made 3 arrests so far. And violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police have had to break up crowds of people wielding sticks to attack wooden boards being held up as makeshift barricade to protect pro-Palestinian protesters. Overnight, New York City police arrested dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying an academic building on Columbia University campus in New York. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 11:06 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
So just to recap on that breaking news, a 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College at 8:50 a.m. this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object.
That's right. A child was given medical attention and 2 adults were also injured. The suspect remains in police custody. We will bring you more on that as we have it.
Well, we should have a drum roll now because he's here. We've been training him all morning. The very famous, even I've heard of Monty Panesar. And Monty, you know what I know about cricket. I can write on the back of a postage stamp that's been shrunk 3 times. But I know you're one of our most successful spinners. You're giving up a life of sport and glamour for the grind of politics. What's possessed you?
Well, I think, the simple reason is, like, I want to, be the voice for the, ordinary people, in Britain and be the voice for them, really. And it's something that really excites me and I feel I can make a difference.
How did this come about and why George Galloway's party when presumably you could have probably, with your celebrity status, gone to any of the main parties and been accepted? Yeah,
because I think when they approached me, they said, do you want to go for the South or Ealing, constituency? And I think the reason I did it, because I was a radio presenter on Punjab Radio for a couple of years. So I got to know the area really well. The people know me really well there.
Is that based there? It's not based in Punjab?
No, it's based in Southall, but it's called Punjab Radio. Yeah. So actually, it's funny enough, everyone around globally tunes into Punjab Radio because of the name. And I got to know the area really well, like I said. And then I studied, sports journalism just close by at St Mary's University. I played a couple of years of club cricket at, Twickenham Cricket Club. So I got to know the area really well. The people know me, really well there. And I thought, hopefully I can make a difference.
Now, of course, back in which mayoral election, 2016, you backed Zach Goldsmith, of course, for the mayoral election. He was a Tory, a right-wing Tory, a Brexiteer, very rich, and here you are standing for the Workers' Party, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum of the billionaire's son, Zach Goldsmith.
Yeah, look, I think the reason being, since that time, going forward now in 2024, I just feel that there's a massive gap between the rich and the poor, and like I said, you know, the working class people, the workers of Britain, you know, their voices are not actually being heard. And you know, our party, hopefully, we get a few, you know, people winning, you know, seats. Then we can be that voice in Parliament for them, because you know, the high interest rate, the cost of living crisis, it's, you know, it's difficult for them.
You don't feel like those people are represented by Labour anymore?
I don't think so. I think Labour and Tory are the same party. That's just dovetailing against, you know, each other, in my sort of opinion. So that's why do we have the Reform Party, you know, which is going to hopefully take a few of the, you know, Tory seats, and with the Labour we've got, you know, obviously our party as well. So I think the reason being is, like I said, you know, it's the people, the vulnerable people, you know, people who living in vulnerable, poor areas. They just feel that, you know, their voice obviously needs to be heard, and it gives them a choice. So in the general election...
So what can you do for a working class family in your Ealing constituency? What would be your pitch on the doorstep why you should vote for me and not the Labour candidate, the Labour MP who's got a majority of about 16,000? What would the Workers' Party give?
Yeah, what we can do is also, you know, try and bring in more investment in terms of, you know, sporting facilities, you know, help with the social housing things as well. And what we also look to do is what we've seen at the, you know, Gurdwara Singh Sabha. They've got obviously a neurodiversity, you know, a project which is actually to help people with, you know, mental disorders. And they obviously want to get me involved to develop a cricket team as well. So what I'm trying to do is branch out the community, where it's not just about, obviously, the areas, you know, what Southall is known for. It's actually saying their voices. You know, there's a problem with, you know, the sporting aspect of us as well. A lot of people in the community, when I go there, they go, I want my son and daughter, you know, to play in football, in rugby and in cricket, but we don't know where to go.
Yeah, some people are getting in touch with us this morning and saying how important to you is the situation in Gaza and Palestine, because that is clearly the thread that runs through George Galloway's campaign.
Yeah, look, it's a clear situation there, you know. I think there needs to be a ceasefire there. I think they need to develop peace between Israel and Palestine. What's going on there is wrong, and we need to free Palestine, you know. The best situation, you know, for Palestine will be if they can develop their own economy, and then, you know, they're free from Israel. You know, Israel doesn't have, you know, all this, what they're doing right now. I think it's wrong.
But have you condemned, Monty, the Hamas massacre of all those Israelis back on October the 7th?
Well, what Hamas did was completely wrong. We know that, right? And I think everyone knows that. But right now, 70%, 60% of population in England want a ceasefire. And why isn't the ceasefire happening? Why aren't the Tories or the Labour Party, you know, forcing that on the Israel government? And I think that's where, you know, the people, our people in England are sort of thinking, maybe both of these parties are not for us. Maybe we need to go to reform. Maybe we need to come here, you know, towards us. So I think, you know, there is a sort of, you know, a bit of a split.
Will you do a pact with Reform? Because arguably you would say you'd have a much stronger chance in that constituency. So why would Reform stand?
Well, I think, you know, Reform is obviously going to stand as well to nick us, you know, in terms of as many seats as they get. But we've already got 500 candidates, and I think we're trying to push to 650. Our party is just growing momentum. You know, the Workers' Party is just, you know, the momentum that we're getting is unbelievable, and I'm surprised by it as well. You know, when I first entered, I thought it wouldn't be this big. So I think, you know, we're going to surprise quite a few people when it comes to the general election.
Virendra Sharma's got a 16,000 majority in Ealing Southall, where you are. Can you take any bite out of that, Monty?
Well, I've got to be doing door-to-door, right? I've got to do the hard yards. I'll grab you guys as well. You guys can come with me, you know, to do that. That'll be good, helping me along. I've got to, work hard.
As long as you taste very nice curry afterwards. There's some very nice curry houses there, and you'll know the best ones.
Absolutely. But I'll promise you, we'll get Andrew and Beth walking with me. We're going to the best curry house afterwards.
Now,
as well.
if we can ask you a few questions, because you're going to be asked, you're going to put on all sorts of spots, because you're representing the Workers' Party, so you will know.
We've called this quiz, by the way, Stump the Panesar.
Stump the Panesar.
OK.
Do you know the cost of a prescription in England?
I think it's about £15.
No.
£9.90.
Oh, OK.
What's the population of Ealing?
200,000.
366,000.
The living wage?
Average living wage.
Well, there's an agreed living wage. Is that right?
40,000.
No,
per hour.
Per hour. It's nothing. You've got to go a bit lower than that.
Yeah. £15.
No. 11.44. So you got some work. You got some work to do. You can get that up to £15. A lot of the voters were like.
Pint of milk from Tesco.
Oh.
I didn't know this, by the way.
I go to Tesco's quite a lot. I know the price of that. I think it's £1.10.
It could be on a bad day. It's 90p normally from Tesco, but you're not a million miles off.
Top of the Premier League?
Well, it's going to be Arsenal.
Oh, very
Well
good.
done, yeah.
You have to get that right.
And which of these is in the Working Party of Britain's manifesto? Is it halve government consultancy spending by bringing in proper spending controls and having a long-term staffing strategy?
No.
No, that's a Labour pledge. Is it 50,000 more police and tougher sentencing for criminals?
Yes.
No.
Oh, right.
Or is it we will fully renationalise the NHS and commit to significant spending on social and economic infrastructure and implement major efficiency savings?
All right.
Number three,
one.
for sure.
Let's ask you another question.
Yeah.
Do sportsmen and women translate into politics, do you think? Do you think about Seb Coe, fantastic double Olympic gold medalist, was a one-term Tory MP, then he looked after William Hague's office, didn't do particularly well. Colin Moynihan, who was an Olympic silver medalist, I think, rower, he went to punt, didn't exactly set the place alight. Does the sporting discipline enable you to bring something special to politics?
Well, I think, this is the question I, ask myself why I'm going into politics. Is one of the reasons is because when I played cricket for England, the fans and the love I got was massive, They're like, everyone knows who I am, the popularity is huge in this country. And I think by using, my popularity, hopefully I can make a difference, to the British people. And, going back to your question about more, sports people making a difference, I think they would, because I think they have a much more, they're much more in touch with, the common man on the street than some of the other politicians, who probably, are obviously, highly educated, but they don't really know what's really happening. So I could see other sports people in the future. This could be the new trend where we see, more sports people who have a huge following to think, I want to make a difference, in my area, and I want to make a difference to my country.
And there won't be, if you win, there won't be many Sikhs in Parliament.
No, there won't. There won't be many Sikhs, and if I do win, I'll definitely bring some samosas, and I'll see you in Parliament. We'll definitely have that.
I'm just interested to know again why this particular party, because knowing how desperate political parties are for people like you to be involved, I'm still quite fascinated by the choice of party. You could have waltzed into any of them, Monty.
Yeah, I think the real choice is that, to be honest, I just looked at it and I thought, I feel there's a massive gap, between the rich and the poor, and we need to now, recalibrate that, where the power is shifted towards more to the, the working people of Britain, and I just feel that, as we have seen.
But is that by taxing the rich? Is that by taking? Because you've obviously done very well in your life. You're a successful man. Would you pay more tax in order to provide more money to people who might be on benefits or need more support from the state?
Well, look, one thing I like to introduce, obviously, wealth tax, and anyone who has over, £10 million of estate, 5% one-off tax. So there'll be some of my cricket mates who won't be happy to hear this, because they're obviously very wealthy.
Which ones?
Well,
shame them.
There's a few of them, who are knighted right now. I reckon they'll be worth over, 10 million.
Yeah.
And, I think James Anderson, he'll be knighted as well, as we all know.
How do your family feel about all of this? What was your background? Like, where's this need to help the less well-off come from?
I think it's just come from, obviously my family. They when they came into the country, they
remind us where they came from.
Yeah, they came from India, and then when they were here, they worked in, my dad worked in a Vauxhall factory, my mum, worked in, obviously laundrette factory. So they're hard-working, working-class people. So I know exactly how hard they worked. So when I see what's happening right now with with our country, I just feel that I could be that voice, I could be that bridging gap where actually, what's really happening to the ordinary person on the street can be heard, in Parliament.
Have we got our immigration about right, do you say? Or do you think there should be fewer people arriving here every year?
Well, I think immigration is good for our country, right? Where the Premiership is right now, we've got over 70 nationalities. That's what makes the Premiership so good, because of immigration. And, I think 25% of our workforce in the NHS is from immigration, but it's the illegal immigration that has a real issue for us. We can't protect our borders. That's one area, I would like, have more of a conversation about how do we protect our borders, how do we protect illegal migration, because they end up going to the most poorest, deprived areas, and when they're there, the resources get, strained in them areas, so it makes it even more difficult for them.
What do you think of the Rwanda boats policy? Do you think it's going to work?
I hope it scares people away.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what the idea is, and if it does, then I think it has worked.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't scare people away, then, you know, a new policy needs to come in place.
And just lastly, George Galloway, did he call you up out of the blue and say, come and be one of my MPs? How did it just...
No, he didn't call me. It was the Leighton,
who's a mate of yours, who's a candidate there.
Yeah, candidate there, who's a very good friend of mine, and... you know, he called me up. He said, you know, would you be interested in it? And when I looked into the policies and everything, I thought, yeah, why not? You know, if I can make a difference, you know, to Britain, to my people, then...
Are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah, I absolutely love it.
Any other big names coming across to Galloway's party that you can give us even a hint about?
I don't know yet. I hope I can, you know, drag a few more.
But are you going to be talking to some people about it? Because you know a lot of people in the
I do. And if there'll be people interested in it, and if they are keen, then, yeah, I'll love them to come and join us.
I wonder how frightened the Labour Party are.
I think they will be scared. Galloway won Rochdale. They should have walked that by-election, the Labour Party. And I know that shadow ministers who've got candidates standing against them, independent Muslims or independent people like you wanting independent seat candidates, they're very worried.
Yeah, I think they would be, you know. I think with the momentum that's going and, you know, for people to have choice, you know, that's what they're going to be worried about. And they're going to think, actually, maybe we just want to come here and vote for Monty in Southall and Ealing.
Is that going to be your slogan, vote for Monty?
Yep, absolutely. I'm the only MP you can trust.
Right, Monty Panesar, great to see you. Thank you so much
see us again.
for coming in. Right, so let us know what you think about all that. Still to come, breakfast experts say the best bacon butty is a sandwich with no sauce.
No.
Idiots. Don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That's good.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
And I did want to give you a platform, but I also want to give you an opportunity to apologise to anyone that you might hurt, and also give a message now to people who might want to copy some of the things that you've done, because people have copied it. So is there anything you'd like to say about that?
So the first thing you addressed, yeah, I do want to say sorry, because I did say sorry in the BBC interview, and that's the only thing they put out as a clip. So I don't know why they tried to do that, but I'll say it again on GB News here. I apologise to all the victims in the past that I've may have caused distress to, may have harassed, may have mentally tormented in any type of way. I apologise to them because I didn't mean to do that, and I was just having fun at the moment, but I didn't realise that it would have negative repercussions and negative effects on their psychological, way of thinking. So I apologise for that. And also, the one thing I have to say to young people is social media isn't real. What I've portrayed to the guys on the internet is that I'm this cool, I don't give a toss about anything. But me as a person, I really do care. And for people I don't really read comments on the internet, because if I was to do that, I would probably go into a depressive state. All I can say to you guys is believe in yourself, and there's bigger things you can do out there than just being an absolute menace on the internet or being antisocial. If you have ambitions, I like to read, I like music. I want to go deeper into my passion so I understand me as a person and not what other people think I am.
You are an articulate young man. You are obviously intelligent as well when you talk like this. And I really hope, for your sake and for the sake of a lot of people who did take a negative influence from what you did initially, that you really don't go back down that route.
I have a child as well, and I have to be there, not just for me, but for my child, for my child's mother, for my mother. I have to be there for a lot of people. It's not just me. So I need to put in the work.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. This is I'm Bev Turner and this is Andrew Pearce.
The bat,
you know that by now.
The panel bat, Mike Parry.
Thank you.
And former Labour Stephen Pound. Stephen, you were drawn by what Sadiq Khan said about knife crime.
Look, you know, tragically, knife crime, of course, has been heightened this morning, but just seeing what Sadiq Khan said just a week ago, Sadiq Khan played down fears over gangs running around with machetes just a week before yesterday's sword attack in Hainault, north-east London. I mean, you know, this has been an ongoing situation with Sadiq Khan refusing to reinstitute stop and search, which all criminologists will tell you is really the only policy in which you can drastically cut down on a crime that's causing young people to be killed.
And the number of knife crimes in 2022-23 last year went up to 13,000 from 11,000. That's 1,000 a month.
This female police officer yesterday, Stephen, the police have said that she should be able to retain the use of her hand if she has years of care and physio, so Mark Rowley has said. But, of course, yesterday, stop and search wouldn't have done anything for a case
No,
like
I think you're absolutely right. I think everybody here at GB News wants to send their absolute best wishes and commiserations to not just the family of the poor lad who was killed, but also those absolutely heroic police officers. And I think it was a woman police officer who tasered this man. And I think he was tasered 3 times.
He was.
Now, I think you're absolutely right to say stop and search wouldn't have stopped this particular case because he was in a van, drove it into somebody's house. But the reality of the situation is that stop and search does work in the majority of cases. It wouldn't have stopped this case, but it would have saved other lives. And I think there's absolutely no way around it.
And it's because of political correctness, because people like Sadiq Khan, let's remember, my views, the Police and Crime Commissioner for London, say it falls disproportionately on members of the black community.
Andrew, there used to be a thing called sus.
I remember
and under the sus laws, basically, a police officer could stop anybody.
That's right.
And you had a completely blanket thing. Why are you stopping me? On suspicion. And it doesn't matter what you are. You know, and sometimes it's on suspicion of being black. You know, it was, but that's a long time ago. And I think what's happened is that overhang of guilt has actually somehow poisoned the current situation.
If you have informed stop and search, authoritative stop and search...
Well, you just have intelligent stop and search, don't you? You know, if a woman's... you got an old woman in a wheelchair, she's obviously not going to be carrying a knife, so you just use your common sense. And when you say it wouldn't have stopped this crime yesterday, a heightened awareness of knife crime will make everybody think again about picking up a knife, you know what I mean? Not just the people who get there. But what it seems to be is that the authorities in London have turned their back on knife crime, and therefore if you go around the streets waving a knife around, nobody's going to stop you. That's the attitude that people are thinking.
It does feel like this attitude that because young black men would be disproportionately targeted in stop and search, that surely the problem is such now that is just something that we have to cope with. If I was the mother of a young black man, I would be saying, stop and search him. Stop and search all of his mates.
That's right.
Stop and search his enemies.
Let's get one thing absolutely straight. It's an incredibly important thing to say. Look, who is getting killed? In the majority of cases, the people who are getting killed are young black men.
Exactly.
That is terrifying. The number of young kids, even in my part of West London, I know, talented footballers, kids who are in scouts, who are getting killed because they're on the bus.
And they've been sucked into a gang culture.
Absolutely so. Or they're involved in the county line. So, I mean, when you say that...
And often bullied into it.
When you say it negatively impacts on young black men on stop and search, well, I have to say death negatively impacts on young black men.
You will now be subjected to a tirade of abuse for saying that on social media, but quite right for saying it.
Well, I'm rather glad to say that this particular channel does actually not worry too much about about offending people. We're rather concentrate on spending the truth, and that is the truth.
It is.
And people being safe, you know...
on the streets.
Let's have a quick look at this. Violent clashes erupted on the campus of the University in California of Los Angeles between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police have had to break up crowds of people. They've been wielding sticks to attack. Wooden boards being held up as makeshift barricades to protect pro-Palestinian protesters. These are live pictures we're seeing here from California.
Why is it the pro-Palestinian demonstrators, it seems to be wherever they go, trouble follows? We've had it in London every weekend, in Britain, and yet the pro-Israel march was called off because of safety
I would say because a level of fanaticism is involved in this. You know what I mean? You know, deep political and religious motives drive the people who get out there on the streets, and there's a level of fanaticism.
And if Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, would say the police, it's two-tier policing, they treat it differently.
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, she proved that, you know, with the Just Stop Oil rioters, with the pro-Palestinian marches, and Jewish people being told to go away because they look too Jewish. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Just look at the number of police cars which are there at the moment. So we're hearing that police in riot gear are arriving at a California campus. There's this protest going on now in New York. Now, of course, it looks like, in fact, there's two, is there? There's one overnight in New York, and then there's this one also in California, which is happening, that we're looking at live. Division all across the world.
But isn't it one of the great conundrums of the modern world that there are millions of Muslims being forced across the border from Pakistan into Afghanistan? There are millions dying in South Sudan. The Uyghurs in China are being slaughtered and tortured. There are millions dying in Iran and Iraq. So, but where are the demonstrations for those millions of people? It does seem to be extraordinary. There seems to be a double standard here.
Because of Israel, it is that...
I'm not going to apologise for Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu is wrong.
But there is a hatred of Israel that is out of all proportion. It's the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah, and it's an illogical hatred, and it could be put down to the fact that most Jewish people are white. Yeah. You know.
We need...
I mean, it's just a fact.
We've been beaten by the clock, unfortunately. Stephen Pound, Mike Perry, thank you so much. Up next, the first failed asylum seeker has been sent to Rwanda. We've been telling you about that this morning. We'll be talking about it a little bit more after this break. This is Britain's
I wouldn't mind £3,000 for a holiday.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A man who worked for Sainsbury's for 20 years was sacked because he didn't pay for a few bags for life. Niamke Dofu put his shopping through a self-service checkout after his night shift, and CCTV showed him choosing the zero bags used option, and he was fired for gross misconduct. Well, joining me now to discuss this in our studio is the lawyer and broadcaster and great friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Andrew, welcome to the studio.
Join you, Martin.
Certainly is. Now, on the one hand, he was caught banged to rights on CCTV. It looked like, and the tribunal agreed, he stole the bags, but a 20-year career dashed on the rocks over 60p?
Yeah, I mean, the headlines are horrendous, aren't they? You sort of turn around on that sort of basis. So basically, there must be a valid reason for dismissing an employee, and you have to follow due process and so on and so forth. So they can look at about capability or conduct. And there has to be appropriate procedures set in place under employment law to afford that sort of protection. What they say, however, if there's gross misconduct, you can be dismissed instantly. Now, gross misconduct includes criminal offence like theft. And the reality is, in the law, if you take property, whatever its value, with the intent of permanently depriving the person of it, then that is theft. And so what they did, they looked at the CCTV footage, and the Employment Tribunal had a look at this sort of stuff, and the guy wasn't just pressed no bags, he went backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. So he knew he was getting bags, and what they sort of turned in, I always sort of know, trust comes in on foot, but leaves on horseback. And so what Sainsbury's are saying in their defence is, hang on, we lost trust in the guy, even though 20 years and so on and so forth. We need to make sure we have trust in our employees.
Do you think they've thrown the book at him, thrown the bag at him, to make all of us worry about us being watched by CCTV? Is this fella a scapegoat?
Oh, I think without doubt it's a story and a warning for everybody.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College at 8:50 a.m. this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was given medical attention and 2 adults were also injured. The suspect remains in police custody. We'll bring you more as we get it. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley has said a female police officer came close to losing her hand after a 14-year-old boy was killed and others injured in a sword attack in north-east London. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. In other news, a failed asylum seeker volunteering to go to Rwanda is a positive development as it shows the country is safe. That's according to the business secretary. Kemi Badenoch confirmed the failed asylum seeker was flown out to Kigali in Rwanda yesterday. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. Violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles. It's between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police have had to break up crowds of people wielding sticks to attack wooden boards being held up as makeshift barricades to protect pro-Palestinian protesters. Overnight, New York City police arrested dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying an academic building on Columbia University campus in New York. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2485 and 1.1704 euros. The price of gold is £1,835 and 26 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,150 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
11:36, you're the Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner.
So the UK has sent the first solitary migrant to Rwanda. He was flown out to Kigali last night.
His asylum bid was rejected last year. He didn't come here, by the way, on a small boat. He voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation with a tiny little package of £3,000.
So the scheme is to separate the forced deportation programme that, of course, we talk about a lot. And our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now to explain a little bit more. Why on earth have the government even told us about this one solitary man getting on a commercial flight to go and sit in a hotel all on his own?
Well, indeed, that's the question. And this is being spun as some kind of proof of concept. It's nothing of the kind. It's a completely different scheme. Those who are hopefully, according to the government, going to Rwanda will be forcibly removed. This person has gone of their own accord. And it's a scheme that's been running for years.
Yeah.
It is just a variation on a scheme where they incentivise people who have no more right to remain in the UK to go back, usually to their own country. But now they've extended it so that third countries can come into place. So if you don't want, for instance, you're from Nigeria, you don't want to go back there, then there's a possibility of a third country. This person has taken up that opportunity. As a scheme itself, I don't think it's a bad scheme.
Yeah.
Lots of people are saying, why on earth should we pay these people £3,000? Now, the government would deny that this is a bribe. They say it's part of resettlement costs to help someone get settled in a completely different country, get off the ground and be able to get employment in that country like Rwanda. But if so the alternative is this person stays in the UK because, of course, they, for whatever reason, can't go back to their own country and they're stuck in limbo. And then we're paying for them to live in the likes of hotel accommodation. Well, if you look at hotel accommodation, we're told it's £8 million a day for the 50-odd thousand people who are being kept in hotels. An extrapolation of that, it's about £175 a day for each person over the course of a year. That's £60,000 just to stay in a hotel accommodation. That's not even taking into consideration the wraparound services that they have. So giving them £3,000 if they'll just skedaddle off to Rwanda is probably not a bad solution.
We've seen the scenes in Mark in Ireland, Dublin in particular. People are in tents. They're not put in hotels there. Should we consider it here, or is it tidier to keep them in a hotel or a camp?
Well, I think
I thought it'd be cheaper in a tent.
Yeah, I mean, some are in tents, but even in London, you can go around and you can see some migrants who are in tents, people that have disappeared off the grid, usually, who have been rejected for asylum and maybe in the process of being removed, and they have just disappeared. They're working in the illegal economy and they have no money to pay for accommodation themselves, so they're in tent cities. But I'm very sceptical of what the Irish government is saying about 80% of those coming across.
I think that was wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're basing this on the fact that the vast majority of the asylum applications they're getting now are not made at airports and ports when people arrive. The human rights charities in Ireland are saying, well, that's because, you know, they're not doing it there because they think they're going to be turned right down. So they wait for a while and then they go to the office to claim asylum at that point. It doesn't mean they've come over the border from Northern Ireland, but it actually suits Rishi Sunak and his ministers to say, look at this, it's Rwanda working.
But there's no prospect that we're going to agree to take them back. Why should we?
Well, that's absolutely one point that Rishi Sunak is determined to stick by.
Yeah.
Again, it gives them a little bit of political capital to turn around and say, yeah, OK, we'll take them, as long as the EU, in an EU-wide basis, who have hammered it to us for years, that any asylum returns have to be agreed on an EU-wide basis. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you want to do that, then yes, we'll return all our asylum seekers to France.
I think it's hilarious.
Can we just quickly as well, Mark, as you're here and we're reflecting on events yesterday and we're hearing of another school incident this morning of people being injured with a sharp object. We were talking about stop and search and whether it works as a deterrent. What is the political landscape at the moment in terms of stop and search and whether it's worth bringing back?
Well, we went through a period, didn't we, under Theresa May, remember her? Yes. Not when she was Prime Minister, but when she was Home Secretary. There was a real cooling of stop and search. She believed all the advice that she was given, that this is targeting specific groups.
Young black men.
Young black men, rather than actually taking a look back and acknowledging, as police will tell you privately but are reticent to do it publicly, that the vast majority in inner-city London, it differs in other parts of the country, but in inner-city London, the vast majority of, say, teenage knife crime-related deaths are young black men, and the vast majority of perpetrators are young black men. It is a specific problem in these communities here. As I say, it differs. If you're up in Cumbria, for instance, then the vast majority are going to be young white men.
But here's the thing, Mark, which I've never quite got. So Theresa May made it clear she wanted a massive reduction in stop and search. So why didn't two constables say, clear off? That's an operational matter for me to decide, because that's what we're told all the time about how they police the riots and the marches in London. It's not a matter for the Home Secretary, it's a matter for the Chief Constable of the Metropolitan Police. They both can't be right.
I think it would be a brave Commissioner or Chief Constable that tells the Home Secretary to take a run and jump, really. They tried during that period under Theresa May to still make it work, but it came really a time when there was a vast reduction in the number of stop and searches. And the police will say, you know, because it's difficult to prove a negative, really, in terms of if they're stopping and searching, does it really correlate to a drop in knife crime figures? We were seeing a drop in knife crime figures during that period anyway. So it is very difficult. But they say that, look, they are absolutely of the belief that if you're stopping a young man and taking a knife off him, then absolutely, potentially, you are preventing some kind of criminal act at some point being committed.
But you're also protecting the boys who feel they have to carry a knife to be safe.
Yeah.
Because you want them all to think, if we get stopped, we're going to end up in prison.
You ask the mother of a young black person, as I have done over the years, who has been murdered, whether they would have wanted stop and search, and they absolutely do.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you, Mark. And our viewer Paul has said, I do like Mark White. He's always very professional. You don't know him like we do.
I like to come on and have a good rant.
Oh, well done. Thank you so much, Mark. Right, up next, a possible prostate cancer breakthrough. Don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Well, chaps in particular, listen hard to this, because prostate cancer screening could be on the horizon thanks to a game-changing trial which aims to cut deaths from the cancer by 40%.
That's right. So let's talk now to Lucy Johnston, who is the Health and Social Affairs Editor at the Sunday Express. Morning, Lucy. Great to see you. So this trial that's about to start, how exciting is it?
It's incredibly exciting. It is the biggest cancer, biggest cancer for which there is no screening at all or no reliable screening. So men have relied upon something called a PSA test. And in fact, only a quarter of people that show positive for a PSA test have cancer. So it's not really worth doing for most people. And men have to undergo painful and invasive biopsies and other procedures to check for cancer that may not be there. So it's very much needed. It's the biggest cancer killer in men. It's the third biggest cancer killer overall, claiming about 12,000 lives every year. And it's on the rise as well. So it's fantastic news to be for the UK to running this trial.
But is it one of those cancers, Lucy, that if you catch it early, the prognosis can be really good?
Absolutely. And that is the same with most cancers. If you can diagnose early, you have a much better chance of survival. And in fact, with prostate cancer, there are about 52,000 people who are diagnosed with it every single year. And 10,000 of those will be diagnosed in the late stage, in stage 4, by which time it's spread to other parts of the body. And very often it will be fatal. So it's good news if we can find ways to pick this up early, but at the moment it's only on trial. They're hoping to get 300,000 men to take part in this trial. The first phase of that will involve about 12,500 men, and it will involve super fast MRI scans. So that's 12 minutes. It cuts the MRI time by down right to about a third of its normal time. It will involve genetic tests because there are various genes that are associated with prostate cancer, and it will involve the PSA test. And we don't know at the moment what's going to work best, but it's a kind of mix and match, and we should have the first results within about 3 years, and then the rest of the trial will take about 10 years. But if we can get this underway and can show some good results, then it could be that we have a national screening tool for men that we can just use and roll out across the older age groups.
It's interesting, Lucy, isn't it? Because the King's much documented problems with prostate and his own cancer has led to a huge surge in men going to their doctor to try and get tests, because this cancer in particular, men have been too squeamish and have avoided the test, which used to be not always very pleasant.
No, that's absolutely right. But in fact, the test that's done now, it picks up a protein which is released by the prostate. And in fact, that protein can show, it usually just shows problems with the prostate. It doesn't really show what the problems are. But you're absolutely right. Men are very squeamish, and men are sort of known not to be as likely to visit their doctors.
That's right. Well, hopefully we've hopefully raised a little bit of awareness this morning. Lucy Johnson, thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. It's PMQs today. Quick break.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's time to take a look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. A lot of cloud today, a few showers around, but many places will be dry and some places will even experience a bit of warm sunshine. Low pressure is moving away. That's the low that brought some rain in the west during Tuesday. The rain's still there in places, but it's easing, and actually many places are cheering up now. A much drier and brighter day for western parts compared with yesterday. Meanwhile, further east, more cloud compared with yesterday and some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, where it will remain cool, 11 to 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, further west and south, actually much warmer than it has been, up to 20 or 21 Celsius in parts of the southeast, especially where we'll get some cloud breaks. But we will see a thickening of the cloud and some outbreaks of heavy, potentially thundery rain arrive overnight, particularly after midnight, especially for central southern England, then into the southwest and South Wales. The risk of frequent lightning, heavy rain and hail in places. Those thunderstorms will be hit and miss, but we'll see an area of fairly heavy rain across South Wales and southwest England as we begin Thursday. Thundery showers in one or two places elsewhere. Otherwise, it's drier further north and increasingly sunny for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, eastern Scotland and eastern England, seeing a lot of low cloud and feeling cool here, but much warmer elsewhere, up to 23 Celsius in East Anglia.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?